JoJo, Dalvin, KC, and DeVante Swing.
Jodeci.
Jodeci's music is different. It's not the polished, smooth harmonies I hear when I listen to Boys to Men, nor does it have the slick sheen of a New Edition record. Jodeci's music has an edge, a rawness that's infused with emotion, but also sensuality. But even underneath that surface, there's something deeper. DeVante, KC, JoJo, and Dalvin created something that few have been able to replicate within R&B music. And within their short reign, they were able to redefine what it means to be an R&B band. This is their story.
Same thing as for DeVante, JoJo, and Mr. Dalvin. All our arrangements and everything is gospel. And that's something we can't help because we were just raised up around it every day.
Charlotte, North Carolina is known for a few things: the Panthers, the Hornets, and church. The South, especially North Carolina, is filled with megachurches. And in 1974, Reverend Donald DeGreat Sr. founded his own ministry on that soil. A few years before, DeGreat had started a career as a televangelist, getting an opportunity to host his own show called Right On after working for the Christian Broadcasting Network's 700 Club. His show, Right On, became one of the first nationally syndicated black gospel music programs to air. And this time on TV led him to beginning his own gospel recording career, which had been a long time coming. In his 20s, DeGreat had stuck his toe into secular music. He told journalist Lauren DeGraff for her piece in the Oxford American that he had landed himself a spot in the Motown Review until he felt a voice from above who told him, "For what profits a man if he gains the whole world but loses his own soul?" He ended up ditching the Review and choosing to stick to gospel. The Don DeGreat delegation took off in 1979 with a hit single, I Want to Be Ready. Donald's sons, Dalvin, Derek, and the oldest, Donald Earl DeGreat Jr., otherwise known as DeVante, all played with his band in their early teen years. They would watch as the music would be created from scratch, adding Donald Sr.'s gospel message to R&B chords and melodies. His sons were enamored with music and from their early years would freelance around town playing for gospel bands. In the 80s, Dalvin and DeVante were a part of a Christian band when they first met Joel Haley. DeVante was dating the lead singer in the band at the time, Tammy Sue Baker, the daughter of the famous televangelists Tammy Faye and Jim. Joel Haley, also known as JoJo, was a member of an ultra-religious family as well. Him and his older brother Cedric were in a gospel group named Little Cedric and the Haley Singers. Cedric, who would later go by the name Casey, was heralded as the Michael Jackson of gospel, a testament to him being such a young child with a big voice. Their family band started in Baltimore, Maryland until they picked up and moved back to their hometown close to the Charlotte area when Casey and JoJo were in high school. In a 1985 article from the New York Times, writer John Paralis stated, "The piping voice of teen-aged Cedric Haley took charge like performers 2 and 3 times his age. By the time the DeGreats and the Haleys were teenagers, they were already professionals in their craft. And although they had gospel roots, they were nothing to play with."
They was like, y'all should do something. Y'all should do something. So one night we said, okay, take us to meet him. And we went to the studio they had or whatever it was. And Casey thought I was talking to one of his little girlfriend because she was in the group. And at the time he pulled a pistol out on him. So, yeah.
And you actually became cool after that?
Well, not exactly. No, not right after that.
The DeGreats formally met, both Haley brothers, after they were recommended to link up from a local girl group named Unity. The meeting didn't go as planned, as Casey pulled out a pistol on Dalvin in the studio after seeing him talking to one of the girls in the group that he was dating. Upset by what just happened, Dalvin left the studio, but DeVante stuck around, got to know the other brothers, and eventually got acquainted enough to start making music with them, mostly gospel at the time. It's kind of funny. JoJo didn't want his own brother in the group either. He thought Casey had gotten enough shine in the gospel world and wanted to have something of his own this time. But DeVante loved Casey's soulfulness and wanted him in the group.
But DeVante wanted Casey in the group because I wanted to get my shine up. Because in gospel, he had his shine. I wanted to walk in my own shadows, walk in my footsteps.
The DeGreat brothers weren't allowed to listen to secular music growing up. They were preachers' kids as their father founded Christ Tabernacle Pentecostal Church when they were around 3 and 5 years old. Their religious parents banned anything but gospel from the house. Dalvin said that when the kids would sneak and buy Prince or Michael Jackson records, their parents would break the tapes so they couldn't listen to them. But the boys would keep buying and listen to them in their headphones. Even though his brother didn't have the best introduction to the Haleys, DeVante kept working with them. While Casey and JoJo were focused on being vocalists, DeVante was more into production. He was said to carry around multiple keyboards like a mini recording studio around town. But one day when he was 16 years old, DeVante had a bright idea. He was going to Paisley Park, Prince was DeVante's main inspiration. He would go to Minnesota, meet Prince, and all of his musical dreams would come true. He saw the opportunity with rose, or purple, rather, colored glasses. In a 1995 Vibe article, he remembered KC and JoJo telling him to not forget about them if he made it in Minnesota. So DeVante ran away to Chanhassen, and every day he would go to Paisley Park begging someone, anyone, to listen to his tape and put him on. But nothing. He would eventually make his way back to North Carolina, empty-handed but with a fire to prove to the world he could do this music thing. KC and JoJo were still in North Carolina when DeVante came back. There was still animosity between KC and Dalvin, so the Haleys and DeVante continued working as a trio at the time. DeVante and the Haley brothers moved in together, basically living in the studio that the Haley family owned in a shopping center. DeVante said, "I lived there 5 nights a week for like a year. A lot of girls. Partied. We had a little money from our gospel gigs. I'd go home Friday nights, go to church on Sunday, and after church go back to the studio. My parents knew where I was."
Gospel, we was considered the bad boys of gospel, all of us. I don't know the switch. I don't know how they came about. We just started writing songs for girls around the neighborhood, and it just came there.
Even though they had gospel roots, the boys dreamed of doing R&B seriously. By this time, the gospel group commissioned had already come out and were doing something that had never been done before. Their gospel didn't sound like gospel, it sounded like what you'd hear on urban radio. Their chords, their harmonies were pure R&B with a gospel message underneath. DeVante and the Haley brothers' sound was influenced by the group. They'd take what Commission was doing and flip it.
DeVante, and we went to his church, their church in North Carolina, and he's the one that picked us up. And man, he was iced out and everything. Nobody had heard anything. He said, "Yo, I want to just tell y'all, man, y'all influenced me. If y'all would listen to some of my music, we got this group coming out."
But they needed a name for this new group, and they wanted it to be uniquely theirs. They were all sitting in the Haley family's front yard. In Vibe, DeVante remembered saying, "Think if we did R&B music, what would it be like?" We started imagining it and coming up with names. I never wanted anything like the thises or the that's. I wanted to put myself in the name. So we was like, why don't we do Joe for JoJo, D for DeVante, and C for KC? Jodeci was formed, and they were good. Really good. So good that even Dalvin now wanted to join, to which KC and the others agreed. Once Dalvin joined the group, the D in their name would be explained away as a shortened to great.
Oh, but let the people know, how did y'all come up with the name Jodeci?
Jodeci is like combined of 3 names. Like Joe is for JoJo. D is for DeVante.
Oh, what up?
And the CI is me, KC, and later on Mr. Dalvin joined the group. So we thought the name was fly, so we kept it in.
There's a sort of music urban legend. 4 young guys pile into a car headed towards the big city, get discovered, and then become rich and famous. But the story of Jodeci isn't that simple. In 1989, they all piled into DeVante's Ford Escort and headed to New York. Back then, New York was the hub for the music business, and the guys needed to get discovered. By then, they had recorded a 29-song 3-tape demo that included a little bit of everything. The guys had it in their mind that their first stop would be Uptown Records. Let me tell you a little bit about Uptown. Founded in 1986 by Andre Harrell, Uptown was one of the hottest new labels at the time. 3 years later, when the Haley and DeGrate brothers were headed to their New York headquarters, they had a fully active roster consisting of Heavy D, I'll Be Sure, Guy, and more. The label was on the pulse of hip-hop and R&B music, and Jodeci wanted to be a part of that. The 8-hour drive from North Carolina to New York was a piece of cake compared to the 5-hour trek from the group's hotel in Queens to Uptown's headquarters. The boys from the South had never made their way around New York before, and kept getting lost along the way. Eventually, they found the company's office and walked in hoping they didn't need an appointment. They all were wearing truck stop sunglasses, which they got on the way to the city. The guys only had $300 to their names, and everything was riding on this going well. It's said that when they first arrived, they got no love, until Heavy D, who was hanging in the office, overheard their tape and convinced Andre Harrell to let the boys sing live for him. And after singing their rough cut of Come and Talk to Me, and going to dinner with Andre, Jodeci was invited to be a part of the Uptown crew that day, but they weren't officially signed until around a year later.
Be honest, Puffy was an intern at Uptown Records. And Puffy ran around, did a lot of things, learned a lot of stuff. I'm Jodeci from watching us on stage, and he's just an intern. So they cut all the, what Puffy did with y'all, he was there being a cheerleader and watching how we was doing on stage, how he was able to go on stage and entertain people watching us.
It seems like almost every artist who was in New York at the time has a connection to Diddy, or Puffy, as he was known then. In the same year that Jodeci showed up on their doorstep, Sean Combs had just arrived as an intern for Uptown Records. Puffy was assigned to the new group, who Andre had living in his 1-bedroom apartment in the Bronx housing projects. After their trip to New York, Jodeci moved back to North Carolina for a bit to gather their things until Andre called them up. The boys, preacher's kids, had been successful since they were children. So Andre wanted to toughen them up. They were scared at first, but once Uptown hooked them up with some music equipment, they were fine. Puffy was assigned to help develop Jodeci. They already had the voice, they already had the makings of their authentic sound. But they needed a vibe. They needed a look that set them apart. New Edition had their Boston swag. The Jackson 5 were all colors and sparkles. But walking into the Uptown office, Jodeci didn't look like a group just yet. They needed their own swag. The group was introduced to the media at Uptown's Christmas party in 1990, and as writer Ronan Rowe stated, they no longer looked like gospel singers. Dressed in combat boots, baggy jeans, and backwards caps, they looked different. They looked like rappers. Dalvin and Puffy worked together on the band's overall aesthetic. They took the way the guys already dressed and tweaked it a bit.
What made Jodeci so unique, it was like we're looking at 4 Tupacs.
Most of the songs for their debut album had already been written in North Carolina and were already on their demo tape. DeVante wrote out all the songs inspired by his girlfriend at the time, Monica, who had left home to go to the army. He never ended up seeing her again. The only thing the group needed to do was go in and master the production. And while Puffy was helping with their overall vibe, Al B. Sure was overseeing the production and execution of the album.
Which one of you does the producing?
DeVante. I produce. I work with Al B. Sure and a lot of people that's on. They also work with other people like Tevin Campbell. We on Father MC, treat them like they want to be treated. And so we've been doing work for a while.
What instruments do you play?
Everything.
Everything. I swear.
The final version of the album took about a week to produce, since most of the songs were already written. The first single, Gotta Love, was an up-tempo, hard-hitting, undoubtedly new Jack Swing record written by KC and DeVante. It was released 10 days after Valentine's Day in 1991. In the video, the guys danced in sync wearing matching outfits while singing and rapping about taking a girl home. But the single fizzled out, peaking at number 79 on the Billboard R&B and hip-hop singles charts. Speaking of new Jack Swing, a week later the new Jack City soundtrack was released, completely overshadowing any buzz this new group was getting, with hits like I'm Dreamin' from Christopher Williams, and even I Wanna Sex You Up from Color Me Bad. If you wanted to hear some new Jack Swing, you weren't looking for it from Jodeci in February 1991. Even still, by May 1991, their first album, Forever My Lady, was released. Every song on the album was produced by DeVante, mostly by himself, otherwise with Al B. Sure. The album was well received by critics. Entertainment Weekly said if they can keep up the momentum of this commercially successful debut, which has already gone top 40 on the Billboard Pop Album chart, Jodeci will be a force to be reckoned with. The album debuted at number 1 on the top R&B albums and peaked at number 18 on the US Billboard 200 charts, even without a smash single yet.
Forever my lady, no one for me, holding me close, yes. She's all I need when we make love. It's like a dream, forever and ever. She's my ecstasy, make of love. When you think of love, you think of Jodeci. Let us caress you, JoJo, DeVante, and Casey Dalvin.
When Al B. Sure and the guys were in the studio one day, Al had an idea for one of the tracks they were working on. It needed lyrics that would really hook listeners in, and it would be an ode to his then-girlfriend Kim Porter, who was pregnant with his firstborn son at the time. Initially, the guys didn't like the subject matter of the song. Casey didn't want to sing it, and Uptown didn't know how it would look having barely 20-year-old guys singing about having children. But the song was a jam, and capitalizing off the group's recent exposure on the BET flagship show Video Soul, they took a big swing and released the ballad as their next single. Forever My Lady was released in August and quickly took off. The song was immediately a hit, peaking at number 1 on the US Billboard R&B singles charts. Jodeci followed up Forever My Lady with Stay, which was also a smash on the R&B charts and was their second number 1. But the fourth single from the album would be their biggest hit yet. Come and Talk to Me was the group's third number 1 R&B hit and peaked at number 11 on the US Billboard charts. The single was released in March 1992. By that time, the album had been out for almost a year and was already 3 times platinum. The remix was produced by Puffy. It was the first record he ever produced because Teddy Riley, who was supposed to be the main producer, didn't show up to the studio.
The additional guest that we have, and who's responsible for this?
DeVante.
Swing.
I am partly.
Swing, do you? Speak up, come on, wake up, let's go.
This is my girl group sister, and this is Tornado. They's hanging out with us today. You know, they're here in Washington doing the album. So you'll hear from them in January.
All right.
DeVante, who is a producer at heart, decided to form a crew of musicians called Swing Mob. The group would meet in Swing's basement studio in Rochester and would also be known as the Basement Crew. Swing Mob included the group's sister, which featured Missy Elliott, Timbaland, Genuine, Tweet, Static Major, and many others. Casey was also doing his own thing. As the lead singer of the group, his star power had risen to extreme heights. Apart from being the consummate star of the group and writing for other acts like Ralph Tresvant, he caught the eye of his label mate, Mary J. Blige. The two crossed paths while Mary was recording her 1992 album, What's the 411, and began dating shortly after.
With two of the hottest singers in the country right now. I finally got them to come down. We're at the Kiss Party still. I got KC from Jodeci, and I got Miss Mary J. Blige. How y'all get that little duet together, Mary?
You know, it's a label thing. You know, we was on the...
Oh, like you ain't want to sing with him like he can't hit a note. Hello.
Look, the boy can sing, no doubt, okay?
No doubt.
But it was a label thing, you know? And we were label mates, and they were just asking us would we do a song together. Like, the label was asking us.
It's a sweet one, too.
Yeah.
You know, tell them what the title.
I don't want to do anything else.
Dalvin, now known to the world as Mr. Dalvin, was getting some celebrity love too. The crew went on tour with MC Hammer during this time with opening acts Boyz II Men and TLC. Dalvin and T-Boz Watkins met each other on tour and started dating.
This is probably unnecessary, but why don't we start here and introduce ourselves?
Hi, I'm DeVante. Mr. Dalvin, baby. KC Sugar. And JoJo.
Jodeci was the hottest male R&B group out at the time, and they each had their own personas. KC and JoJo had the voices, DeVante was the musical savant, and Dalvin had all the girls. But with all that fame and commercial success, the group didn't feel appreciated by the label. The group was starting to see artists with less success as them on other labels with flashy cars and jewelry, and they felt like they deserved more.
I think if your parents heard the album, they would be very proud. I think they'd be very proud, because you're a classy group of guys.
By the time they started recording for their sophomore album, the guys were known nationwide, topping the charts and had posters on every young girl's walls. But their families didn't approve. They would visit their home church, sometimes with Puffy or Aaron Hall, and hang their heads. They would try to get their parents to listen to their music, but it wouldn't happen, even though the world approved. At the time, their families didn't. Also in April 1993, KC and DeVante, both 23 years old, were accused of assault when a woman claimed that she was fondled by KC as DeVante pointed a firearm at her. In the press, the men claimed the girl was upset that there was a firearm in the house and that no one would take her home, so she made up a story about being assaulted. But they both pleaded guilty, DeVante to gun charges and KC to sexual contact.
The allegations are false, definitely false. And it's like, you know, I guess when you're in the spotlight, so to speak, as we are, you become a target, you know. As far as like, it could happen to anybody, like, as far as, you know, it could happen to you. Anybody can say, well, Donnie Simpson did this, and you just got to defend yourself, whether he did it or not. And, you know, some people gonna say, well, he had it, maybe he did it, maybe he didn't. You know, it's gonna go back and forth, but the allegation's definitely false, and we just got to take care of it.
Pray for her.
While recording their second album, the guys started to feel increasingly unhappy with their situation at Uptown. They wanted to get paid. So they began to get acquainted with
Marion Suge Knight,
founder of Death Row Records and industry strongman. Known for his violence and tendency of strong-arming people, Knight was someone who you didn't want to be on their bad side. Jodeci began hanging out around his crew and even considered leaving Uptown for Death Row Records. But they had an album to put out first. Plus, Knight helped JoJo get out of a sticky situation after a night out with one of the kings of R&B. JoJo, KC, Dalvin, actor Tyron Turner, and Bobby Brown were all in a nightclub when Bobby started popping off telling the guys how Jodeci couldn't f*** with New Edition. The entire night, Bobby kept jawing about how New Edition was better, despite JoJo telling him to chill.
JoJo saying, I'm tired of this shit, tired of your shit, and so JoJo out the limo, Bobby Brown in the limo. As Bobby Brown as he's getting out of the limo, JoJo just fired on him. Bam! After that, it was no. It was like Bobby Brown never had a shot because it was already. He didn't have a chance to defend himself like that. But yeah, JoJo took off.
The next day, Bobby spins back ready to get his payback. JoJo called night, and he ended up fighting Bobby's associate Big West to prevent the two superstars from going at it again.
This what happened backstage. First of all, I get here before everyone else, and I steal everybody's money out of their pockets they left the night before.
In June of 1993, Uptown produced an MTV Unplugged, which featured all of the active artists on the label. During the taping, the group performed a cover of Lately by Stevie Wonder, which promptly shot up the charts after the special aired. It was Jodeci's highest peaking pop hit, reaching number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in August 1993. During the Unplugged performance, Casey also sang the DeVante-written Mary J. Blige duet, I Don't Want to Do Anything, and watching it you could cut the tension with a knife.
Jodeci.
The group's sophomore album, Diary of a Mad Band, was released in 1993, and in retaliation to their conversations with Death Row Records, Andre Harrell and Uptown decided to do zero promotion for the album. Despite that, the album went number 1 on the R&B charts. And Cry For You, the lead single, was the 5th consecutive and final number 1 for the group. The guys also had a new look, ditching the denim suits for leather and tattoos. John Mulvey from NME commented his thoughts on the group, saying that they look like rejects from the Dog Pound, and sound about as mean as Luther Vandross. They showed up to the 3rd annual Billboard Awards sporting their new vibe, carrying a machete and wearing face masks. They had officially branded themselves as the bad boys of R&B. With no promotion of the album, Diary of a Mad Band went certified platinum. Unlike Forever My Lady, Diary of a Mad Band was not reviewed as positively by critics. AllMusic called it jarring and mismatched, and others thought some of the more explicit records were in poor taste. DeVante had produced most of this album as well, with Dalvin solely producing the Jodicidal Hotline track. DeVante also invited some of Swing Mob to collaborate on the album, with Missy and Timbaland featuring on a few tracks, as well as the rapper Redman. The album was more experimental than their previous project, as exemplified in their second single Phenon, whose Hype Williams directed video was shot in a mental asylum, and Snoop Dogg, the primary Death Row artist at the time, makes a cameo.
One of my bodyguards, he's getting ready to walk me to my band's restroom because it's not safe to walk around by yourself.
On the night of July 23, 1993, Dalvin's friends had surprised him at the studio with a birthday party. Everyone was there, except for one person, his brother. It was unlike DeVante to not show up, especially to the studio. The guys continued their night, but as time passed, they started to feel uneasy. The guys rushed to DeVante's house, only to find him tied up and beaten bloody. He had been the victim of a home invasion. During the robbery, DeVante was viciously beaten and pistol whipped, which caused his skull to split. He fought back and bit off the finger of one of his attackers. But they had ran off with over $20,000 worth of jewelry. There's speculation that this may have had something to do with the Death Row and Uptown drama, but none of it had been substantiated. Whoever it was had to have been close enough to Swing, that they knew exactly where he was going to be at that time.
Right here, kid.
Yeah, I am. You're on TV Raps. We up in this piece.
Yeah.
This is it. Bad Boy Entertainment.
Bad Boy
huh?
Entertainment, no doubt.
Cool.
Also in 1993, Puffy was fired from Uptown Records. Andre claimed there couldn't be two kings in the castle. Even though he was fired, Puffy still executive produced Mary J. Blige's 1994 My Life album, an album about heartbreak, pain, and KC.
And that was a nightmare in itself, the whole situation. And the My Life album stemmed from so much hurt, like, from there.
Mary has claimed that their relationship was extremely toxic and filled with abuse. I was in a relationship where we were both young and both super successful. I loved him, but neither one of us could handle the success of our lives. In 1995, Mary was on the British television show, The Word, donning a ring that KC had given her. Mary thought it was an engagement ring, until she was publicly humiliated by him on the show.
I have to ask you this really quickly. Jodeci were on the show earlier on in the series, and Terry asked Casey this question. Have a look at this.
Now, you're going to break a few hearts because I've heard that you're going to marry Mary J. Blige, aren't you?
That's a rumor. You know what I'm saying? That's a rumor for the States, too, you know. Casey is not getting married.
Now, was he being super cool or what? Are you getting married?
No, we're not getting married.
I was just going to say, I'm very glad to
No, we're
hear
not
that,
getting
Mary.
married. We're not getting married now.
Mary knew right then that she should leave the relationship, but the two would officially split around a year later. Casey would go on to acknowledge his shortcomings, claiming he didn't know how to handle a relationship at that stage in his life.
Number one, I was young. We both was young, and our careers were colliding like that. And I mean, like I said, we was young, man, and I wasn't ready to settle down. especially with my career taking off and her career taking off. It just wasn't gonna mix. It wasn't gonna happen. But I did, and I always will love her.
By July 1995, the show, The After Party, The Hotel, Jodeci's third and final album on Uptown Records, was released. Like with all of their other projects, DeVante handled most of the production. The album peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and was the third album from the group to reach number 1 on the top R&B albums chart. In 2 months, the album was certified platinum. The album was raw, edgy, and grown. It made the tracks on Forever My Lady sound like hymnals. The lead single, Freakin' You, peaked at number 3 on the R&B charts.
All night long. I wanna freak you. I wanna freak you.
Genuine, a member of Swing Mob, recalled DeVante locking himself in the studio when recording the track. He said DeVante locked himself up in his studio for about a week. And when I say locked up, I mean he was sort of like in jail. He wouldn't come out the room. Speaking of Swing Mob, by the time Jodeci's third album came around, the cracks were starting to show for that team. Members of the crew, like Sista, had released projects, but none had commercial success. Also, it's alleged that DeVante was becoming more physically and mentally abusive to the group.
All right, so all of them was in the studio, you know what I'm saying? So, you know what I'm saying, he walk in, he's smacking everybody. Genuine, Timbaland, Missy.
What, literally smacking
them?
No,
Are we saying DeVante was the R&B Suge Knight?
Yeah.
This is what we're saying?
DeVante had reportedly changed a lot since his home invasion back in 1993. They all had. Former Uptown executive Virgil Sims said, Jodeci were no longer church boys, they were like rock and rollers. Trashing hotels, being wild. When they were on stage, they were on. But off stage, it was chaotic. They were always respectful to me, but there was also a crazy side. DeVante was fully embracing the rock star lifestyle, even briefly dating Madonna. In a 1995 interview, he called her one of the most beautiful people I know. But Dalvin's relationship with T-Boz was getting rocky. They just didn't seem to be on the same page, and him being a natural ladies' man didn't help at all. In her memoir, she detailed a night where she had to put one of his other chicks in her place. While Dalvin was back home visiting in Charlotte, he fell asleep on the phone, to which she heard a woman on the other line walking into his room. The woman ended up picking up Dalvin's phone and words were exchanged between her and T-Boz. I hung up, threw on a t-shirt, sweatpants, and sneakers. I grabbed a taser, this pen that could transform into a knife, and $5,000 in cash for bail, and left my house at 5 a.m. I got on the first flight out of Atlanta an hour later. She made it to Dalvin's hotel, and after tricking the clerk into giving her an extra key to his room, she entered room 420 in a fit of rage. She immediately started attacking the girl, who was in his bed, so much so that she broke her own hand and the girl ended up in the hospital. Dalvin claims he was asleep and the other woman entered his room without him knowing. The girl, who T-Boz calls Mimi in her book as a pseudonym, threatened to press charges but eventually dropped the lawsuit, and eventually T-Boz and Dalvin broke up, because they were toxic, to say the least. By 1995, the East Coast-West Coast beef was in full swing. In August of that year, a month after the show, The After Party, The Hotel dropped, the second annual Source Awards was hosted in New York, where this legendary moment happened.
Coming Death Row.
While in New York, and reportedly without paying Uptown, Knight was able to get the releases of Jodeci and Mary J. Blige from the label. It's alleged that his confrontation with Andre got physical, but I can't confirm. When him and Puffy were cool, Knight allegedly tried to get him to press Andre into letting go of their contracts, but Puff was too scared to ask. The acts all signed with West Coast management. The group claimed they started making 3 times what they were getting at Uptown under Knight's management company. But being that they were brought up with Puffy and were now all cool with Death Row, this caused some tension between the guys and Bad Boy.
And when Puff called me, he's like, man, what side you are? I said, man, I'm from the South. Puff, I ain't got nothing to do with that. You know what I'm saying? I'm from the South. I'm not from the I'm from the South.
The show, The After Party, The Hotel rolled out a few more singles like Love You for Life and the Dalvin-produced Get On Up, which DeVante hated because he claimed it was too happy. Swing Mob was in disarray and eventually dissolved in 1995. Artists like Timbaland, Genuine, and Missy ventured off and formed their own conglomerate, which they called the Super Friends. So much had changed since 1989, when the two sets of brothers packed into that Ford and headed for the big city. They were now famous, and although not filthy rich, they had enough money. But they had demons that fame and fortune could not fix. In 1994, the guys began working with Death Row artists on features. Their first foray into the West Coast crew was on Snoop Dogg's Murder was the Case soundtrack. Casey and JoJo also sang the hook on Tupac's hits, How Do You Want It and Toss It Up. But as far as Jodeci tracks went, by 1996, everything had slowed up for the four. DeVante just stopped showing up to sessions.
Everybody wants to know what's up with Jodeci. Let's just start with that first.
That's the question that's going around the world.
Yeah.
Jodeci is not breaking up. You know, we just, doing separate things right now. JoJo and myself, we have the Love Always album. We doing that.
Jodeci insists they didn't break up after their 1995 album, but it sure felt like it to fans, and Casey and JoJo needed to do something while the group was on hiatus. The brothers released their first joint, Love Always, in 1997, which sold over 2 million units and had the duo's first and only #1 hit with the masterpiece All My Life. The ballad was #1 on the US Billboard Hot 100 for 3 consecutive weeks, something Jodeci never achieved. By this time, their mother had a change of heart and decided to embrace their music.
I've been happy ever since the Love Always album came out because I did it with my brother. As long as I'm with my brother, as long as I can look to my right or my left and see my brother beside me, I'm happy.
Reverend DeGrade eventually acknowledged his son's impact as well, saying, "I don't listen to it as a rule, but DeVante did change the sound of R&B music." Dalvin was also doing his own thing. In 2000, he signed to his brother's ex-Madonna's label and released his album Metamorphic. It had moderate success but didn't chart. During this hiatus, the group started to have an array of very public setbacks. Casey and JoJo both admitted to being alcoholics. The cracks started to show in Casey's foundation when, during a Jingle Ball concert in 2000, he exposed himself to the crowd 2 songs into his set. In 2001, he was sentenced to probation for that incident. Casey and JoJo were also arrested for tax evasion in 2003. The men pled guilty to misdemeanors and were sentenced to give back pay. In the years that followed, there would be multiple stories about Casey and JoJo's antics in the media. In 2010, after finding it hard to book gigs due to their reputation, the men decided to do a TV1 reality series about their journey to sobriety in hopes to clean up their image. DeVante was always the enigma of the group and maintained a pretty low-key image other than some gossip scuttlebutt here and there, until in November 2010 he was arrested in a Subway restaurant for public intoxication. The guy's party lifestyle was starting to catch up to them. These incidents marked a turning point for Jodeci as they were forced to confront the consequences of their actions and the impact it had on their careers. The public began to see them not just as musical icons but as men grappling with the demons that fame had amplified. But they were dealing with the price of fame in front of our eyes, and the road to healing is bound to have a few bumps. In February 2014, Timbaland announced he was working on Jodeci's 4th album. In November of that year, Jodeci reunited and performed a medley of their classic songs at the 2014 Soul Train Awards. Their 4th album, The Past, The Present, The Future, was released on March 31, 2015. It was their first album in 20 years. DeVante assisted in producing every song on this album and was featured in the credits under the moniker X1500. The album got moderately positive reviews and peaked at #2 on the R&B charts. And although the group looked different than what fans saw in the 90s, they were back like they never left. The guys are still performing together, recently just completing a sold-out residency in Vegas at the House of Blues.
Ain't nobody perfect. Anybody can slip. You know what I'm saying? Anybody can slip and make a wrong decision or whatever. But, you just gotta stay focused. You just gotta, and then you'll be all right. You'll be straight. So we try to do.
It's funny, there's a thin line between R&B and gospel music. Tweak a lyric there, change a melody here, and you could be listening to either a commissioned record or a Jodeci record. The DeGrade and Haley brothers straddled that line. While Casey had depth in his voice that made you react like the words of a Pentecostal reverend, the nature of a Jodeci record was anything but safe for Sundays. Their rugged image paved the way for acts like Chris Brown and Usher to ditch the sparkly suits and be themselves on their records. The former Choirboys revolutionized R&B music with a fresh, unparalleled vibe. DeVante, Dalvin, Casey, and JoJo made Pleading for Love look effortlessly cool. Their unique style brought an unmatched realness to R&B that no group has surpassed since. The brothers from North Carolina transformed the music industry forever. So when you see acts like Chris Brown, 4 Bats, and even Drake dressing how they want to dress and sounding as raw and expressive as they want to sound, remember this. They were all members of the Church of Jodeci. Thanks for watching, everybody. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.